unbelievable news coming out of the U.S.
Yeah, unbelievable is putting it mildly.
Right. I mean, you and I both follow U.S. politics pretty closely.
We do.
And I think it's safe to say neither one of us saw this coming.
Not a chance.
The articles you sent over about the election results, I mean, whoa.
Talk about a plot twist nobody predicted.
So for those listening who maybe haven't had the chance to catch up yet, the big shocker again, Donald Trump is back in the White House.
Back in the White House, yeah. Defeated Kamala Harris, no less.
It's wild, right? Like, considering everything that's happened since his last term.
It's like something out of a movie.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about the Capitol insurrection, the felony charges he faced, even assassination attempts, and somehow he's back on top.
I guess you could call it the ultimate political comeback story.
You really could, but how did he manage it? I mean, the articles mentioned something about securing those key electoral college votes.
Yeah, the Electoral College. That's always a fun one to explain.
Well, for our listeners who might not be totally familiar with the American system, you mind breaking it down a bit?
Sure, so it's not as straightforward as just whoever gets the most votes wins. The U.S. has this thing called the Electoral College, where each state gets a certain number of electors based on its population.
Right, like a point system almost.
Exactly. And usually, whoever wins the most votes in a state gets all of that state's electoral votes. So you can actually win the popular vote nationwide, but still lose the election if your opponent wins enough states with a lot of electoral votes.
Yeah, it can definitely be a bit confusing. The article hinted that the popular vote was super close this time around.
Right, which makes Trump's win through the Electoral College even more dramatic.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So now everyone's trying to figure out what a second Trump presidency means, especially for us here in Jamaica.
Especially for Jamaica. We've seen statements from both Prime Minister Holness and opposition leader Golding, and, well, let's just say they're choosing their words carefully.
Super carefully. It's like they're walking on eggshells.
Well, you can't blame them. The U.S.-Jamaica relationship is incredibly important. They don't want to do anything to jeopardize that.
Right. Holness talked about Jamaica's commitment to a strong and enduring partnership with the U.S., regardless of who's president, and Golding emphasized continued strong relations and collaboration.
Exactly. Classic diplomatic language. Everyone's trying to maintain a good relationship with the new administration.
Makes sense. But behind those carefully crafted statements, there have to be some serious discussions happening. What does a second Trump administration mean for things like trade deals, tourism, security cooperation?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about Trump himself. The Republicans now control the Senate and made gains in the House. That gives them a lot of power to shape U.S. policy, which could have a big impact on Jamaica.
Okay, so let's break that down a little. What kind of impact are we talking about specifically?
Well, for starters, immigration policies could change. We know that was a big focus for Trump in his first term. And with more Republican lawmakers, it's possible we'll see stricter measures.
And that could definitely affect Jamaicans living and working in the U.S.
For sure. Then there's climate change. The U.S. is a major player in global climate agreements, but Trump has been skeptical of those agreements in the past. So with Republicans in control, there's a chance the U.S. might pull back from its commitments.
Which would obviously have global consequences, but especially for island nations like Jamaica that are already feeling the effects of climate change.
Exactly. And we can't forget about foreign aid, how much the U.S. gives, and to whom is often influenced by the party in power. So we'll have to see how a Republican-controlled Congress approaches aid to Jamaica.
So many moving pieces. It's almost like a giant game of chess with all these different factors at play.
And the board keeps getting bigger. But hey, that's politics for you. Never a dull moment.
Definitely not. So from a shocking election result to all these potential ripple effects, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. And I think it's safe to say we're all still processing this news and trying to figure out what it all means.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the point of these deep dives, isn't it? To explore these complex issues and encourage people to think critically.
Exactly. And speaking of thinking critically, here's a question I think everyone listening should consider. What does a second Trump presidency mean for the world stage? Especially after everything we saw in his first term and with all the geopolitical tensions happening right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big one. And the answer to that question could have huge implications, not just for the U.S., but for countries all over the world, including Jamaica.
Definitely something to keep in mind as we move forward and see how this all unfolds.
Well said. Thanks for breaking it all down with me.
Anytime. Always happy to dive deep into these fascinating and sometimes mind-boggling events with you.
All right, everyone, until next time, keep those brains engaged and stay curious.
And keep sending us those articles. We love diving into the news with you.